Okay, so I had an epiphany as I was coming up with the lesson material for this week's lesson. And that epiphany was around the way that this material is packaged. I came up with a new way, I think. I've never seen it done this way before, but a new way of packaging improvising in scales, and how all of that is overwhelming. We talk about modes, we talk about different scales, major, minor, harmonic minors. There's all this stuff, and it's totally overwhelming. And I wanted to take one idea, one shape, and let that one idea, one shape, one pattern represent everything. Your minor stuff, your major stuff, modes, it can represent everything. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at in this week's lesson. So for those of you that are stuck, feeling stuck and frustrated because you're overwhelmed by all of the options, so many scales. If you get a book on scales, by the way, they're like this thick. And the first question you have is like, where do you start? Do I start with page 1? Well, the truth is there's only a few things you really need to know if you're improvising, if you're playing rock and country and blues and the stuff that most of us are interested in, most of us watching these videos, the active melody audience. If you're getting into jazz fusion or more advanced jazz, it's not the case, but most of us just want to be able to sit down and jam in a bluegrass jam or play with our friends or whatever. There's just a handful of scales that can give you all of that. And so that's what we're going to take a look at in this lesson. We're going to take actually just one pattern, and it represents kind of everything. So in this video, we're going to go through the major, how to play this in a major key. I'm going to give you 3 different examples of that, and we'll kind of cover all of that. If you'd like to get the part 2 video where we'll talk about how to use this same shape but in a minor key setting, and also the jam track, there's actually going to be 2 jam tracks that go with this lesson. You can get those by going those extra materials, the extra part 2 video and the jam tracks, by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP506. All right, so the first thing we need to be able to do before we can jump in and start improvising and playing any scale is we have to be able to determine what key the song is in. And you have to use your ear for that. And I do have a little technique I'm going to show you. We're going to walk through that. But you don't always know what key you're in, especially if you're wanting to play along with the song on Spotify or the radio, or you just show up at a jam. You don't always want to stop and ask somebody, hey, what key is this in? You want to be able to work that out on your own. And so I'm going to show you a very simple formula that I used when I was just learning how to play. This is the formula that would work for me no matter what style of music. This works. You just need to find the tonal center. You need to be able to find the key of the song. Okay, so I have a jam track that's playing, and this jam track, by the way, is in a major key. That's the only sort of clue I'm going to give you to start with. We're going to start by learning something in a major key. I'm going to show you how you take this one pattern, and you can play in multiple spots in a major key, but then we're going to switch, and I'm going to play a minor jam track, and we're going to use the same shape and pattern, and it's going to work in a minor key as well. So there's one thing to learn here. It's not like there's 10 or 100. It's one, and it's very easy. But let's start by finding the key of the song. That's what this is about. So we're going to start with fret 1, and I'm just going to walk up. So just kind of watch me here. So we're going to start with this, and we're going to see if there's a match. We're going to keep walking up the fretboard until we find a match. Well, no, that sounds bad. Hopefully your ear will tell you. That's not good. Now that kind of is a match. That seems like a possibility. We'll keep going though. That could be a match. Yeah, that sounds kind of good, but that's not the key. We're finding the key of the song. You'll know it when you hear it. No? So that, I'm pretty sure, is the key of the song. But here's sort of the litmus test to verify that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bar where my finger is, which was on the 5th fret there. I'm going to play that E shape from the Cage system. And I'm going to play that chord, and yep, that's a perfect match for the 1 chord. So now I know that note is an A note, so that tells me we're in the key of A. And it's a major sound. So hopefully you can do a few things just by listening. Hopefully you can tell that's major. Major is when you've got he's got that third in there, the major third. The minor is where it sounds, sounds a little darker. I can't really demonstrate it with that going. We'll get to that one in a minute. But anyway, we've got the key of the song now. So here's the next step that's involved. Okay, so far all we've done is taken that first string and we walked it up until we found a match for the key of the song, and we verified it by playing that E chord shape. Now that's I know that that's an A chord, but honestly that doesn't matter. And none of the labels, what we call these things, interval names and all of that, none of that really matters. In the end, all that matters is, does it sound right? So I'm going to be somewhat sparse on the terminology. We're going to be focusing more on sounds, because that's really what this is about, is being able to hear these things. So anyway, we're here at this note. Now, here's what I want you to do next. If you've got a guitar with me, great. If you don't, pause the video and go grab one, because what we're going to do is we're just going to walk through this little pattern. And so we're going to line our fingers up. We're going to start on the first string, but we're going to line each finger up over a fret. And so, and we're going to call our fingers 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So index finger's 1, middle finger's 2, ring is 3, and pinky is 4. And we're starting here on that root note. Which will be, that's going to be our 1. So here's the pattern. Ready? It's 1, 3, 4. And we do the same thing on the second string. 1, 3, 4. Don't worry about where we're going yet. Just follow with me. So we have two very symmetrical shapes. Very easy to picture, easy to play. Okay, now we're going to jump down to the third string, and we're going to put our pinky on this 7th fret here. So our pinky is going to shift over a fret as we go down, and we're going to play 4, 2, 1 on that string. So we skipped the 3 that time, and then we're going to do the same thing on the 4th string. 4, 2, 1. Those are the finger numbers, not anything else. So 4, 2, 1. So let's back up. Let's start down here at the bottom. Let's walk all the way up. Ready? We have 1, 2, 4. Then we have 1, 2, 4. Then we shift over with our index finger to that 5th fret 2nd string. We have 1, 3, 4. And then we have 1, 3, 4. So what is this crazy little pattern here? Well, the truth is that's the major scale. That's a piece of it anyway. The major scale runs all through the fretboard, but this is like one little snapshot of it. And when it comes to learning the scale, what most people do is they start trying to learn it everywhere. And you can do that, and at some point you are going to need to know it all over the place, but not to start making music, because it's the same notes. I mean, the truth is, if you're playing them up here, if you're playing them down here, it's still the same notes. You're just playing them in different positions. And so we're going to start here in 1, and because what this is going to allow us to do is start making music. Now, some of you are recognizing this shape already. I actually just used it in last week's lesson. And here's the first thing I'm going to say. The song we were playing was a major key. And so the 1 chord was major, right? It's an A major. But what we just played there is Dorian mode. Now, Dorian mode typically is what we would think of playing over a minor chord. It would be like a minor 7 chord. But you can use Dorian mode over a major chord. You just get a bluesier sound. It's sort of like the minor pentatonic scale. It's really made to go over a minor chord, but you can, if you want to blues up your sound in a major key, you can do that. You can do that with a minor pentatonic scale. Same is true with this Dorian scale, or Dorian mode. And so that's what this is. So kind of use that chord shape as an anchor to picture what's going on. You can see the chord shape is right in the middle of that. And so I know that's kind of a weird starting point, but you're just going to have to trust the process here. So that's what we have. We have this shape. And by the way, this shape, now that you've got that, that's going to be the same shape that's going to allow us to unlock all the other scales. It's just using that same shape. It just depends on where you started. So what we have then is Dorian mode using that little pattern. Let's play that now. Let me put it in context with a jam track so that you can start to hear that minor, this is kind of a minor blues kind of sound, how it works in a major key. Okay, so I have the jam track going again, and let me demonstrate how this Dorian mode works over this major key blues. So check this out. I'm just going to be playing the same notes that I just showed you. So anyway, you can, I mean, it's a very sort of small little example there, but you can start to hear it. I'm limiting myself, sort of staying in those parameters, not going outside of it. It doesn't sound perfect all the time. There's some places where if you landed on a certain note, it might clash a little bit, but for the most part, you get that nice kind of bluesy little sound. So what you do when you're playing a lead break is you'd use that as sort of a little place that you can jump into for a minute and then jump out of, and just to kind of blues it up a little bit in kind of a jazzy way. It sounds a little jazzier than that minor pentatonic scale. Okay, so we just heard how that Dorian mode fits over this major key jam track. But now let's take that same shape and let's move it up 2 frets this way. And watch this. So here's an easy way to do that, by the way. If we think about our root note, let's just think that. So we have our A note. Remember, we're in the key of A. And you've got a root note there, and you've got another one down here. So that would be, if I were playing the chord, for example, where my pinky is, that would land in on that note in the chord. Now, if I were to replace that finger with, instead of playing my pinky there on that 7th fret 4th string, if I use my middle finger, so we're going to go 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4. Same pattern that we just did. We just moved everything up. Remember, we were here before. Now we're here. So what we have now is we have the major scale. We have the A major scale. That's a one position of it, and this is just one little snapshot of it. But and that's your root note. So you have, hear it? This is the major scale. So I'm using that same pattern to create this minor blues, and then I can just shift it up to get more of a happy major sound. So think of a dial. I should put a graphic up on the screen. I don't know if I'll have time to do it, but just think of a dial, and you've got the real happy, positive, sound, which is the major scale, super happy. And then if you were to dial it in a little bit more bluesy, and like turn the dial, the other way, you've got more of a bluesy vibe. But either one of these is going to work over that jam track. So now let's take a look at both of these. I'm going to go back and forth between them, and I want you to hear them in context. Okay, so I have the jam track playing again. I'm going to demonstrate. We're going to start in the major scale, and then we're going to go into that Dorian mode thing using that same pattern. And even if you learn nothing else in this entire lesson, you've got a lot of material just with this. So don't let all these scale options overwhelm you. So check this out. We'll start major. I'm just walking right up the scale. So you have it fits over that? Now it sounds kind of cheesy and happy. It's, what makes a blues work is when you throw in some of those blues notes. But for now, just to demonstrate, we're just going to stay into that. Now check this out. I just slid down 2 frets and I'm playing into that Dorian thing. And I can go back and forth between them, and they're right here in the same sort of neighborhood, pretty much. Let's do it real slow. Let me take it slow. See, I slid up into the major. Now watch this. What happened there? Started in the major, but I hit this note, which is in my Dorian thing, the Dorian mode. And so you can start to blend them. And now I realize this may not be the most efficient way of doing it, and we should maybe consolidate this into a little tighter region, but not in the beginning. No, just separate them. Have one area for Dorian, one area for the major scale, and go back and forth between them, even though you have to jump a little bit. I think it's good because it's training your ear to hear those differences. So let's move on to the next thing that we're going to learn using the same shape. Well, hopefully you're getting excited and starting to see some of the possibilities here, and see that you can take this one pattern and you can start to make blues sounds and major sounds. Now I'm going to show you another position to take the same shape, same exact thing, same pattern. We're going to move it up now to a different position, and we're going to get yet another sound. And so what we're going to do now, remember we're playing in the key of A, right? So that's kind of, we determined that up front, the key of the song. Now we're going to come up here and we're going to play our A chord using the A shape. So this goes all back to the cage system. We could play it down here, but to make it easier to see this pattern, we're going to play it up here. Right? So the top part of that A shape looks like this. So that's where we're at. We're playing our A chord, but playing it using the A shape. So we're going to take that same pattern, and where I played this here, my index finger was on the 12th fret first string. We're going to let that be 1. So check it out. 1, 3, 4. And then we go down to the second string, 1, 3, 4, same pattern, right? And then we come down here to the 14th fret third string and we go 4, 2, 1. And then we do the same thing on the 4th string, 4, 2, 1. So when I play it all together, I have a new scale. Now we're playing Mixolydian mode. That's what this is. This is Mixolydian mode. Now, what is Mixolydian mode? Well, Mixolydian mode is really just the major scale. See, listen to this. But it's got that one flat 7. When you get all the way to the 7th interval, you flatten it. You just go down 1 fret. You go backwards 1 fret. So it's the same thing as your major scale with that one exception. But that one exception makes everything sound totally different. You get much more of a bluesy version of the major scale. So I would, if I'm going back to our dial thing, if we were to say the major scale is super happy, super positive, the Dorian thing is a lot more sad and bluesy, this Mixolydian would be sort of in between. It's kind of got the happiness of the major scale, but then it's got that flatted 7, which gives it sort of a little bit of a bluesy edge. So you've kind of got, like in a dial, you've got kind of 3 different sounds you can dial in now. And when you get good at improvising, you can seamlessly kind of go between them. And also when as you get better, you wouldn't be jumping around, like jumping all the way up here to play Mixolydian. You'd be playing everything in the same neighborhood. That's when you get to level 2, or that's more like level 3. Like when you really got it is when you can do that. And so, but for now, don't get caught up in that. Just for now, try and take this same pattern, even though it's not as economic to do it this way. I think it's a good way to get the sounds in your head and start feeling it out. And when you're comfortable, then you can find Mixolydian mode down here. And so once you realize it's just the major scale, all of these things, all these different modes, it's the same major scale. It's just, it depends on your starting point. You're changing some of that stuff, but the patterns are the same. So I've said this many times, and I've always had a hard time getting this point across, but once your fingers know what to do, your fingers have the pattern memorized, you'll be able to, they'll just start to do their thing. They'll start to you'll kind of pivot. You'll go maybe from this note down a fret, but your fingers are going to know what to do to kind of complete it from there. So if you want more on the major scale and learning all 5 patterns, so this would be like one of the 5, I've got a lesson that I've done on that. I'll put a link, or I'll put the lesson number up on the screen. You can check that out if you want, but I wouldn't start there. I would start here, especially for those of you that are kind of getting new, kind of getting into this for the first time, new to this. Just start here and try and play around with it. So let's take a listen to Mixolydian mode now, along with the jam track, and we'll kind of jump around between the 3. Okay, so now that we have the jam track playing, let's start off in the major scale. And let's go into Dorian. And then let's come up here to this Mixolydian. So what you can do now is you can jump back and forth between any of these. They're different scales. They have totally different feels, and you could stay in any one of them for as long as you want. But and you can also play whatever tempo you want. So that's sort of what this is all about, is just being able to get those different sounds and play around with them and hear that sound. All right, so let me take all of the information we've talked about and button it all up, and also mention a few things that I probably should have mentioned up front. If you're playing in a major key, you can, remember our dial, you can dial it major or minor. That's true of the pentatonics as well. So if you're playing major pentatonic, it's going to sound great. If you want to blues it up, go into the minor pentatonic. So you can use that dial. And people that are really good at improvising are good with the dial. They're good at knowing sort of when to dial in what. But in this case, we didn't talk about pentatonics. We talked about the major scale, which works well. Happy sound. But then I went into that Dorian mode. So I can go major or minor if you're playing in a major key. In the next video, we're going to talk about a minor key. That's not the case in a minor key. In the minor key, you can only stay in the minor stuff. So Dorian, the natural minor scale, minor pentatonic. You can't throw in the major stuff. It's just a clash. It's one of those kind of weird things. So that's really it in summary, is you can work that dial and dial in the Dorian sound. By the way, one question I can already anticipate, somebody's going to say, okay, well, Dorian is minor, but so would the natural minor scale have worked over a major key like this? Not really, and it's because of that sixth interval. In Dorian, you have that raised sixth, whereas in the natural minor scale, you have that, and it's just a clash. That doesn't sound too good over a major chord. So that's why Dorian works so well in that situation. All right, well, that wraps this up. I hope you're excited about playing and you've picked up some new ideas. Leave a comment and let me know if any of this has changed the way that you're thinking about improvising, or changed the way that you're viewing the fretboard, or even if it's just taken some of the anxiety out of it. I like knowing those things, and I think it's helpful to other people to read those things, because we're all kind of learning this, and it's difficult for everybody. And I've been doing it for a long time, and I get frustrated with it. The frustration part never goes away, by the way. It's always going to be an element of that. But just try and remember to have fun with it. All right, we'll see you in part 2, where we'll talk about the minor scale and how that same pattern is going to work in the minor scale. And we'll also, I'm going to throw in this, we're going to talk about how the pentatonics relate to all of this. So we'll talk about that in part 2.